Hey guys, my name is Rob. Welcome to Kinetic Rugby League. In this video, I'll be giving you my Super League Round 16 power rankings. Let's crack on with 12th place. So starting with 12th place, and still in 12th place, I have the London Broncos. But I must say, fair play. Fair play. Good effort. Very good effort. I know that might sound a bit condescending, but fair play. This is kind of what I've wanted to see from London a bit. It's just teams are a little bit shaky, like Leeds at the moment. Just taking them down to the wire and just being a little bit different. And you saw that with some of the attacking plays with London, is that, they still, threw out the typical shapes, but they tried to change direction a little bit, did a few things a little bit differently, and posed questions for the Leeds defence. And that's just what I like to see. And keeping Leeds to 17 points is relatively low scoring to the rest of the games they've had so far this season. So they must be very proud of that defensive effort. And 16, is that the most points they've scored? So no, it'll be second most, something like that, second or third most they've put up this season. So as much as it's disheartening to lose that way, hopefully take a lot of confidence and a lot of pride in that performance and just keep pushing for the rest of the season, pick up another win. Hopefully they can. But yeah, it's just, I think most of us will agree, hopefully all of us will agree, it's just nice to see them really push some teams, and hopefully they can hopefully pick up another win. Just not against Warrington, please. Moving on to 11th place, and still in 11th place, I have Hull FC. Very good effort from them against a decent-looking Salford team at the moment. I think we can all agree that this Hull FC team would probably batter, or at least comfortably win, against Hull FC of round 1 to round 4 or 5. Like, this is a different-looking Hull team. I'm not going to use the E word, even though I've said it for the past month and a half. They look like a different team. They at least look more competent in attack, and there's a bit more resilience defensively. So they're starting to put some things together. Simon Grix is probably a little bit more familiar with, players on an more individual basis than he was just as the assistant. But there seems to be a different feel around Hull FC right now, which is certainly good for them, especially going into next season. There's not much else they're going to get out of this year, but I think Hull FC fans, as much as there probably isn't going to be many wins to come for the rest of the season, will hopefully take some pride and confidence going into next year in just at least some of the efforts against certain teams. And to have put in an effort like that against a strong Salford side is at least a good marker of where they could sort of lay a foundation for next season. They won't have all the same players. Reynolds was a key factor in that game, who I believe has now gone to Featherstone. But I could be wrong on that one. It's just what I heard. But yeah, Hull FC are a different team now. I'm happy for them to a degree. But yeah, hopefully they can push on with a few more wins, but we'll see how it goes. Moving on to 10th place and moving down 1, I have the Huddersfield Giants. What was that? Just what was that? I understand. I only heard about the bug going through the camp at Huddersfield after I watched some of the commentary back on Sky Sports, because I was at the game. Fair enough, and if you're missing players because of it, fair enough. But some of the effort was just abysmal. Absolutely shocking in some of the efforts. There was some moments where Jake Connor was really trying hard to make tackles, and some moments he just wasn't visible at all. Some of the communication between players was just way off. I think in attack, they had their okay moments. They, nearly created a couple of overlaps, but they were shut down pretty well by Warrington. So defensively poor. In attack, looked okay and exciting at times, but the kicking game is just shocking. It is god-awful. I don't know what Lola Hayer's doing. I don't know what Clune is doing. I don't know what Jake Connor's doing. Kicking game shocking. The only saving grace they've got is their attack. I think, and it sounds weird considering they put up 0 points, but I think they look, the best looking thing about them is their attack. And that's the only thing that's going to save them or get them anywhere near a playoff push, but I'm pretty sure Huddersfield are done for playoffs. I'd be very surprised if they turn it around. If they do, fair play to them, but I'd be very surprised if they made playoffs now, and I'm personally going to rule them out completely for a playoff spot. But Huddersfield Giants down 1. Moving on to 9th place and moving up 1. I have the Casford Tigers. Congratulations, you have now made it out of the bottom 3. Congratulations to you. This, I think, has been coming for a little while. It's just been dependent on teams above them, but they've really been making strides in attack, especially since Tex Hoy came into the team. They've looked more exciting overall. There's an element of resilience about this Castleford team, which is really, really good to see. And, you know, they've struggled the past couple of years, but under new leadership and, you know, a few little pieces here and there. One thing I mentioned, I can't remember which video it was, but it was very early in the season. I basically said, I don't think there's any specific individuals that's going to push them on to the next level, but I think it's overall the squad is kind of built for balance, which is what it felt like early on. It was just built for balance, but there were no real stars in there. Tex Hoy has kind of become the star of the team, especially on the attacking side. But yeah, the resilience factor, I think I'm trying to think the last 3 games was Wigan, Saints, and Wigan, Hull KR and Saints. And they kept them to minimal points. I think they lost by 2, and then won by 2, something like that. It's very, very close games against 3 really, really strong teams at the moment. So Castleford honestly could have been moved a bit higher up, but that gap to the team above them is tiny. But I'm really liking what Castleford's doing at the minute. The resilience is great. In attack, not putting up tremendous points at the moment, but they certainly do have it in them. I think there's the tiniest chance of a playoff push. Like, it's so tiny. But I trust them to do it more than I trust Huddersfield. So, congratulations, Castleford. You've moved up 1. On to 8th place now, and still just about in 8th place are the Leeds Rhinos. What are you doing? What are you doing? There were mixed emotions at Headingley. I saw, you know, when I look back at the highlights and I saw the drop goal, the winning drop goal, half of the fans, like the middle-aged blokes, were cheering, and half of them were thinking, bloody hell, how have we done that? What an absolute shambles that was. Is that even a Leeds accent? I don't know. It's just northern. But I don't know where to place them. I just don't understand. I guess you could look at the game against Lee and the emotion that was surrounding that, and I understand that, but at least that came with a level of organisation. It came with a level of competence. So it wasn't just pure chaos. It wasn't just emotion without some kind of stability. But this week, you're in a situation where you're fighting for a playoff spot. There's a completely major shift in culture around the team at the moment. Losing Rowan Smith, and you should really be dominating against the Broncos. And of course, I gave them praise, the Broncos praise, for their efforts. But still, you're the Leeds Rhinos. Look at the individuals that you've got available. You should be dominating these games. So the gap for me to Castleford is so tiny. The only reason I've just got Leeds above Castleford is because it was only 4 games ago, obviously not including the international, 4 Super League games ago when Leeds actually battered Castleford. That's the only thing keeping them just above them at the moment, but next week or the week after, it could easily change. Leeds need to sort it out. Both sides of the ball, they're still very flat and very predictable and boring in attack. And defensively, for some reason I trust them more defensively than I do in attack, but it's like, it's 50-50 on a week-by-week basis. I don't really know what team we're going to get, but yeah, Leeds Rhinos in 8th. Moving on to 7th place now, and moving down 1 are the Lee Leopards. Now, before you come at me, I will acknowledge this is probably a little bit unfair, because if you look at the matches that Lee have played recently, they've put in some decent efforts, especially defensively, maybe not so much in terms of attack, but they've limited points conceded. So it probably is a little bit unfair, and given that they just lost to the current champions and Challenge Cup winners, like, I acknowledge it's a bit unfair. I think with them and the team that's above them, who I'll get on to, for me, I think this is one of those where they would change week to week depending on performances. I don't like to make singular changes on a week-to-week basis. I at least like to take into account previous performances and teams played and circumstance, things like that when I do these rankings. But for me, Lee and the team just above them, I think it is going to be, for now, a week-to-week change until one of those teams finds a bit of stability. So I think Lee is still a team to be taken very seriously. I think they can make the push for playoffs. Also a team that I trust more than Huddersfield to make playoffs. They've got a long way to go, but In attack, I think still need to work out something. They've been a bit stale and been really struggling to put up big numbers in recent weeks. But defensively, they've looked pretty solid. And I guess to only concede 24 against Wigan is not the worst thing in the world. Better teams have conceded more, so fair play on the defensive side, I suppose. But Lee Leopards down 1. Maybe unfairly, but down 1. On to 6th place now, and moving up 1, Catalans Dragons. So as I said, for me, I think Lee and Catalans are pretty much neck and neck, and it's just based on this week's performance. Catalans getting the win, a big win over Hull KR, by the way. Of course, Lee losing to Wigan, you know, it's not a rare thing, is it? So this may be week to week. I do think the previous weeks, obviously before the international break, Catalans had still been very poor, been dominated easily in games, and allowed momentum to shift way too easily. I do think, generally speaking, that with the individuals and the coach that they've got, Catalans can kind of turn it around, their entire season around any week. Like, they could start going on a win streak right now. They could just switch it on like that. So, as I said, it's going to change with Lee week to week at the moment, unless Catalans can start getting on some kind of win streak. It's going to be difficult because, as we've seen, they are very inconsistent. That's my biggest issue with them, is that they're a little bit like some other teams where we don't really know what attacking team we're going to get. We don't know what defensive team we're going to get. And it makes them tricky to place, but I think for the most part are still have the individuals and are competent enough. The one point I have to make is the short dropout from Jordan Abdul. Now, I know I'm focusing on an individual here, but what are you doing? You've just made the objectively incorrect decision. Now, I want to make it very clear that if it did come off and they received the ball from the short kickoff, you know, we would have been saying, oh, that was a ballsy play and fair play. But it was objectively the incorrect decision to go short from a dropout and put yourself under that much pressure. There's no need for it. You have a lead. Why do something that you could easily get wrong? It makes no sense to me. Absolutely no sense. That was a dumb decision. That was absolutely ridiculously stupid from Jordan Abdul. Which is weird because normally his kicking game's very good. But that was an objectively stupid decision. Hopefully he's learned a lesson. So, big ups Jordan Abdul. Moving on to 5th place now, and still in 5th place, I have the Warrington Wolves. I think other Wire fans that normally watch these videos will agree that, well, for me anyway, I always want to be careful about how much I move at Warrington, because when I look at other teams, I can do a bit of give and take, and I can let teams off for certain things, but I hold Warrington to a much higher standard. So as much as people might say you've just beaten Huddersfield 48-0, regardless of whether Huddersfield are really low down in the power rankings or not, Hull KR lost, and Salford were poor against a poor team, you could move them up a couple places, but I just normally treat Warrington, I'm more critical of them. So much more critical of Warrington than any other team, as they are my team. So I think 5th is about fair, but I will say that 5th, 4th, 3rd and 2nd are probably interchangeable on a week-to-week basis. So we'll see how the games go next week, and then they may be interchangeable on a week-to-week basis, a little bit like Catalans and Lee. But in terms of attack, Warrington looked brilliant. They created plenty of moments off the cuff. I think Dufty was excellent. I think he had was it a try and 4 assists, something like that? And a ton of meters again. Roderick Ty was excellent defensively, along with Connor Wrench, actually. And even King out of position on the wing, and Ratchford. Both sides were solid defensively. The work rate through the middle, especially from Zane Musgrove, was excellent. Danny Walker was solid, but yeah, Dufty, Williams, brilliant through the middle. And yeah, just an incredible, resilient defensive display, and plenty of offloads. We've not had some of those, we've not had a lot of offloads the past couple of weeks in Super League. So plenty of offloads, keeping the game going, creating the second phases. We just looked in complete control. And in the moments where Huddersfield looked threatening, we shut it down very, very quickly. I'm very proud of the effort on both sides. So I probably could have moved Warrington up more, or at least one, but as I'm so critical, and I think looking at the other games in context, I think it's about fair keeping them fifth for now because of the last couple weeks in Super League. Moving on to fourth place now, and still in fourth place I have the Salford Red Devils. Just about getting it done against Hull FC. Fortunate that Reynolds missed the kick in the last couple of minutes to equalise. I think this is probably an outlier at the moment for Salford. They have had a couple stinkers this season, nothing too crazy. They've had a few stinkers, but right now they are a much stronger team, and I think at any point during the season, teams that aren't objectively the best in the league, like by a huge margin, basically Wigan, they'll have, you know, these kinds of games will happen. And let's not forget, this is a Hull FC team that they are a different team, as I've already mentioned. Salford aren't going to be perfect every week. They will still have issues with personnel. They're still possibly a weaker team without Cade Cust. I'll leave that up to Salford fans to decide. But I don't think it's the end of the world. They've still been fantastic over the last couple of weeks. They beat, what was it? They beat Saints. Was it Warrington then Saints? And then it was this game. I can't quite remember the exact order of fixtures, but they've been fantastic. And I think one little slip up is not the end of the world. Obviously, if they want to be taken seriously as one of the best in the league, right up there near Wigan, maybe these kinds of close calls can't really happen too much. But yeah, to basically repeat the same thing again, not the end of the world. Salford will be fine going forwards. They'll still have tricky games here and there, but I think they'll be alright for the most part. So Salford's still in fourth place. Moving on to third place, and still in third place, I have Hull Kingston Rovers. I'm not going to talk too much about performances. I kind of wanted to talk about something a little bit different with Hull KR. It might seem like a negative, and I understand that. I wanted to talk about what I think they should be focusing on going forwards, like my biggest issue with them. Because Hull KR are a good team, but not great. They can be great, and they have great performances. They have great individual performances as well. But as a team right now, they're a good team, but they're not a great team. The main reason for that is I don't think they have, I think most, even Hull KR fans, would probably agree that they don't have like an objectively clear, typical number 7. And I know people might say, well, have you ever heard of Mikey Lewis? He's not a typical number 7. Let's be frank about this. He's not a typical number 7 in the way that Harry Smith is, or Lewis Dodd, Leon Hayes, Josh Drinkwater, Jordan Abdul-Theophage. Who else am I missing? Mark Sneed. Mikey Lewis and even May, they're not objectively, I've said objectively quite a few times, they're not obvious, typical number 7s. And that's what I think Hull KR as a team are lacking. Mikey Lewis, in the 6 role, I think he's excellent. At his best, can be, you know, pushing the boundaries of world class. When he's at his absolute best, pushes to that level. But it's just getting that out of him consistently. But in terms of controlling the game, I don't ever look at May and Lewis and think they're going to control this game. And I think that's the biggest issue with Hull KR, is that when they come up against teams with a typical number 7, they take a bit of a step back. And you got players like Miller, who are more of a typical number 7 as well. So yeah, that's my only issue with Hull KR, is just being able to control the game. They can make things happen from nothing. Lewis can do it. May can help do it. Evolds has been doing it quite a bit recently. Litton and Parcell, they can penetrate through the middle. And they've got players on the edges that can really hurt teams. But it's just about learning to control games. That's the only thing I need to see from Hull KR going forward for the rest of the season. And for the future, for them to be regular competitors right at the top. It's just someone to control the games like a typical number 7. And that's it. But Hull KR, as of right now, still in third. Moving on to second place, and still in second place, I have St Helens. This is another tricky one because over the past couple of weeks, they have looked, in some weeks they've looked stale, some weeks they've looked okay. Like, they've been a bit up and down kind of all throughout the season. I've seen a lot of people bashing Paul Wellens, they want him gone. I've seen a lot of people bashing Johnny Lomax specifically, saying that he's like, he's washed and he's past it. Which is, is a strong call to make given the success that you've had with him. But sometimes there has to be a point where you say, well, he's not really contributing at the same level anymore, so you need to start moving on. People have really said that Mbai, when he was at 6, was a huge difference maker. So there are still times where Saints look a bit stale in attack. I think defensively they still look really, really strong for the most part, and the scramble defense is, it can be excellent, but in attack looking a bit stale. And as I've said, the gap between 5th, 4th, 3rd and 2nd is tiny and can change week to week. So Saints could drop down to 5th by next week. It is possible, but we will just have to see. I think they'll be okay, and they'll still typically beat teams that they should be beating, but they will have a couple of rough ones in there because they're not a perfect team, and they're nowhere near where they were like last year and the year before and the year before that. But St Helens still just about in 2nd. Finally, in 1st place, and still in 1st place, I have the Wigan Warriors. To me, they're clearly number 1. I don't think there's anyone close, even Saints or Hull KR, Salford, Warrington at the moment. Towards the back end of the regular season, somebody might come close in these power rankings. I think that would mainly depend on long-term injuries and suspensions, things like that, and would be the only reason why they would lose the League Leader Shield. I think it's 95% sewn on. The 5% is to account for long-term injuries or suspensions. They might miss field in certain weeks, they might, but the thing is with this team is, the culture around them helps. Okay, you're missing Jay Field, but you need to control the game. All right, well, we've got Harry Smith. You're missing Jay Field, but we need a spark. All right, you've got Bevan French. We're missing Jay Field, but we need to attack the edges. All right, well, how about on the left side, you've got Farrell and Wardle. On the right side, you've got Nsemba and Kieran. Oh, but what about wingers that can finish off these great players? Oh, well, you've got Marshall on one side, and you've got Miski on the other side. Don't worry about it. We're covered, mate. And you've got players like O'Neill continuing to develop as the number 1, number 9 for this team, with players like Cruz Leeming, excellent players coming off the bench. So, and they're just stacked in the forwards as well. So they're fine. They could miss one of the key players. They're just dealing with it very nicely. And it's a great opportunity, hopefully in some more weeks coming up, that Jack Farriman gets some more game time where they might put Bevan French to fullback to give Farriman some game time at number 6. But if they don't want to disrupt that 6 and 7 partnership, they would probably just go with Hampshire at number 1. And at least, even though he seems to keep dropping the ball, he'll at least get more experience and therefore hopefully become more safe from a Wigan perspective over time. But for me, Wigan clearly still favourites and probably sewn on for the League Leader Shield. So Wigan Warriors still in 1st place. So there you have my Super League Round 16 power rankings. If you've got your own list, do let me know in the comments down below. Have I been fair with anyone? Have I, been unfair with any of the changes? Do let me know. But that's going to be it. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.